Okay, I'm Joachim Schurig. I'm from Lionbridge. For those who don't know me, I've been working since 15 years actually at the now core translation memory software of Lionbridge, which Jan was just at this moment using and demoing. So this was a special moment for me. I think 15 years ago I hadn't thought about that. So thank you. These days I'm more in new language technology research. I'm also to some extent here as the chair of the ETSI ISG LIS, which is the standards committee, which is continuing the work Lisa did on the translation standards like TMX, TBX, SRX and GMXV. XML, TM, not to forget. So I have the problem that I have to talk under two hats, which will not be always easy during the progress of this presentation, but I'll try to go ahead smoothly. So how do we produce today in Lionbridge? So you saw the external view. You just connect to a service and you can request some translations. I don't know if this displays. Yeah, it does. What is behind this is actually a suite of internal software which is all developed in-house. At the front we have a portal, then we have a workflow tool, then we have a translation tool, which is the translation workspace, translation memory software you have seen in action here, normally with its own editor or editors, and not with the built-in in the MAT tool. So this is the translation environment the translators see normally. And we can plug in machine translation, which is actually not in all cases in-house developed, so I was not completely correct there. And we have a language quality checker, the linguistic toolbox, which completes the suite. So for this often creates a translation workflow coming from the portal, going through various stages of these tools and getting back through the portal to the customer. We use a number of standards in this workflow these days. We have switched nearly the complete production to XLIF 1.2 over the past, let's say, 6 years, and have now a saturation of about 96% or so of our words translated. The rest of it is still going through the old RTF. We use TMX as the exchange for translation memory data, and we should use ITS. We don't. We should, or it would help if we would use SRX for segmentation, but we don't. We don't need it. But that's. I will continue discussing SRX a few pages later. This is basically how we work today. Now. Okay, this is a quick recap. Basically, it's what I said right now. Let me just get maybe into two items here. The workflow system, which was the second one after the portal, which you see there as well, is these days, every workday, processing about 5,000 individual files. It transports about 35%, or let's say 1/3 of our production these days. The rest is still sort of handled semi-manually, semi-automatic, however you want to see it. The translation memory, translation workspace module is, I think, the largest installation of its kind globally. So we have completely online accessible more than 15 billion words and counting, obviously. All of these are real-time accessible. This was something that was new to the market when I introduced it in 2001, actually. Yeah, that's the system behind it. So we switched, as I said, to using XLIF 1.2 internally. This gave us a lot of benefits internally. We had no character corruption issues all of a sudden, because Xlif is a clean Unicode and XML format. We had no document corruption for similar reasons anymore, and typically no back conversion failures, and we had control over the whole editing environment. This gave us a benefit over the previous way of using first of RTF, various editors, and so on, which we can measure, for example, in one large project, Visual Studio Orcas, which was the first large Xlif project we ever did, which can be counted as to 10% of reduced cost. And obviously reduced errors, reduced problems, and so on. So Xlif 1.2, for those who don't know it intimately, Xlif brought the promise of interoperability into the translation industry. So coming under the sales of XML, which means to solve all problems for humanity, at least depending on who's talking about it. Xlif had the same promise. We had to find out over the years that Xlif 1.2 is a fairly good standard. We participated in its creation, but unfortunately it wasn't tight enough. The specification wasn't explicit enough, and it allowed too many legal sort of, even when you followed the specification, legal diversions. So one cannot really say that you can work with Xlif files which are in 1.2 format, which had been created by other parties. So therefore, interoperability was just a promise for 1.2, but it helped us a lot for streamlining our internal process. That was the real benefit we felt. Yeah? So, and these benefits, particularly those which I listed already before, still let Xlif 1.2 fly. And today we translate annually more than 1.2 billion words in Xlif. Today, I checked a week ago actually the current figures. It looks as if it's going to be 1.4 billion this year. So this is significant, yeah. So this means, I think the largest translation service provider globally, I don't know exact numbers, but I think so, has switched its production 95%, 96% to Xlif, and we're flying. It's working, yeah. And we feel the benefits. Our project managers tell us they have a lot less problems in delivering projects. And so here we see that Xlif standardizing on a common format helped us to gain benefits over the previous non-standardized processes. However, I would call this the standardization version 1.0. So this standardization we did here represents the traditional translation process. We have as pivotal format Xlif 1.2 and TM data exchanged with TMX 1.4, and it helped us internally. But and as you can see in the fourth point there, the benefits helped us to limit our acceptance level for new clients from several thousand US dollars to $100 today. So, because we have reduced transaction cost. Benefits from Xlif 1.2 ends when interoperating with third-party software. We need filters, actually, to translate Xlif 1.2 from other vendors. And other vendors need those too. We are using a specific Xlif. Similarly, TMX also shows its limitations when exchanging with third-party software. And also because TMX is, I want to say, not tightly enough specified. And yeah. So These standards, if you will, TMX, XLIF, they were all incepted for the traditional workflow which accompanies documents which get exchanged. So SRX and TBX, which are accompanying standards for segmentation and for terminology exchange, are sort of document-centric standards as well. So in some way one could say these standards which accompany today's modern workflows represent a old-fashioned workflow. Now come in the CMS systems. This graph, you can't see the details, but it isn't necessary. It's 1,000 icons of current CMS systems. Are what is currently, or from now on, containing our content. So we are more and more forced to get content out of these systems, to translate and get them back into these systems. This is no document-centric approach anymore. These data change while we translate it. So it's a completely dynamic process, but unfortunately, particularly on the side of the CMS vendors, nobody has thought about that there might be the need to localize data sometimes. So the best is we get access to the internal XML data of the CMS system. Well, there's a handful of exceptions which have defined translation interfaces, I want to note, but it's few. And in most cases, it is causing us a lot of manual adaptation and configuration to parse the XML files which these systems typically present. So copy and paste is a common way to get data out of these systems and back into the other. And if you think about what is particularly important during the translation of human or natural language, the segmentation of such natural language into sentences, because human language typically gets translated in the boundaries of one sentence or of sentences, because those are the units of information. We lose the segmentation, unfortunately, which we apply when we read and filter those XML files, when we deliver the translated files back to the CMS systems, because the CMS systems maintain or administrate files in larger blocks than sentences typically. They have paragraphs or even larger blocks. So this means that when target gets modified in the CMS system again, we don't know how to associate it to an existing source. And we are asked by CMS operators often to do such, because some subject matter expert did some modifications in the target language, and they expect, of course, this change being reflected in our translation memory data. We can't do this in an automated fashion these days. It's a semi-manual process, I would call it. We are working on making this semi-automatic, but if in the research community there would be more approaches maybe coming up how to solve this problem, maybe by better XML markup, which is difficult because of the nature of how content is entered into CMS systems, then this would be a major help for multilinguality in CMS systems. So the point is that as an industry we need a solution for this problem, the interchange in the first place with CMSs, but also how not to lose the segmentation on the sentence level once the data is back in the CMSs, because it causes us tremendous transaction costs. But as an economy as a whole, if you think about Europe as a marketplace, sort of, it creates us a lot of transaction costs which other markets which do not have multiple languages do not have to bear. So it's a competitive disadvantage to not having a technical solution here. So, but is the whole model which we are using not really only the last millennium's translation model? So a TM, translation memory, external to the content data, Is this the right way? I mean, it came from days when we exchanged Word documents or even printed documents. And then we used the TM because we had databases where we could stuff data into. Shouldn't it these days not be the CMS, which should contain lookup data, which we could reuse? And shouldn't we have interfaces to these data via protocols and online APIs instead of pushing files around? Think about it. It's amazing for these, I mean, more than 1,200 content providers, which keep more than half of the content we receive these days. There is no standardized way of getting the data through electronic means. I mean, via the internet, if you will. So, okay, my time is over, and therefore this is what you should read on the internet when this is published. We need a new type of standards. And I have a wish list as well, particularly that everyone uses XLIF 2.0, because XLIF 2.0, also in our opinion, is a much, much better successor for XLIF 1.2. And if there is something that keeps in your memory from this presentation, please let it be this one. Thank you.